Good evening. It's November 29th, 2011, and tonight I would like to talk about some things that have happened recently in the news. Some of them are quite disturbing, and also to how they relate to one another. And I'm talking specifically about the recent revelations at Penn State University, and then this past week at Syracuse University about the treatment of children by adults. And I won't even go further into what's alleged, but I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. So the subject was being discussed today, and the question is how is it that these things went on so long and no one said anything about it? And I think that it's come to light that that some people knew about the occurrence of the molestation of these children, and that now also in Syracuse University, that as early as 2003, that the local police chief knew about it. And it turns out that the local police chief used to be, is an alum of Syracuse University, and used to play ball and had some ties to Syracuse. So now the U.S. attorneys have taken over, I think, both of those cases, which is probably appropriate. And of course, everyone gets a fair trial. I think they should anyway in this country. But if the evidence proves out that they were guilty of these crimes, then they should have the appropriate punishment. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about. What I wanted to talk about is the discussion today of how do these things happen and no one says anything about it. And it got me to thinking about four things today: Penn State, Syracuse, the Occupy Wall Street movement, and Herman Cain, and how those things all tie together. And I think I want to start with what the disturbing pictures that I've seen of lines of policemen preparing to go and um, evict the Wall Street movement people, and in Oakland and in Los Angeles, well, at the university in California, at UC Davis. And I will say that I was happy to hear that twice this week in Los Angeles and I think Pittsburgh, where the police were, I think, under orders to go and move them out or something like that, that the police showed up. And I understand that it didn't turn into a big confrontation as some of the previous ones have. But what um, if if we live still in a relatively free country and these police officers go home to sons and daughters and wives and maybe grandchildren? How is it that they would participate in some of what we've seen over the last couple of months? And I thought that possibly, um, I think a lot of people in their lives, through their work, probably have been faced with a dilemma where they had to make a decision about their personal integrity as opposed to what someone that they worked for or what have you wanted them to do. And that's how I tie all of this in together. I think that it's it's possible that many of the police officers that are participating in doing these things to the Occupy movement are doing so because they feel that there's the thin blue line, and either they're on one side of it or the other. And then also there's the subject of job security. I mean, how are you going to tell your watch commander or what have you that that you don't really feel good about going out and harassing a bunch of college, pepper spraying a bunch of college students that are engaged in what look relatively like a peaceful protest? Not to mention that there are probably more effective things that or places or things that those police officers could have been using their time for. So how does that relate to Penn State and Syracuse? Well, I think it's sort of the same situation. The person that first observed this illegal behavior going on may have told someone, and then of course it didn't come out like it should have, or wasn't reported immediately to the authorities, or maybe it was, but this maintenance of the status quo, the fear of change, fear of reprisal, fear of losing a job, compromise of personal integrity to maintain a status quo, or to maintain your personal position on one side or other of the line, be it protesters or police, or be it employed, unemployed, or be it in the know about something or not in the know about it. And then lastly, how it relates to Herman Cain. So a couple of weeks ago, things have gone by and we've heard accusations of inappropriate behavior involving women. And then just within the last couple of days or so, this assertion by this woman that she's had a 13-year relationship with Herman Cain. And how all of these things were not in the view of the public or in public information until just recently. Why? Well, once again, fear of reprisal, fear of loss of a job, maintenance of the status quo, fear of change. And then in all of those situations where one person comes forward or one person says something, then everyone comes forward. How often have we seen that in Tiger Woods? It immediately comes to mind. So on a note about Herman Cain, even if, and we don't know at this point, even if all of the allegations are unfounded, how does he recover in this presidential campaign? And I think it also goes with my observation that once something like that comes out, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not, it's out there, and how do you combat it? So those are a few of my comments about that. A couple of more notes that I want to make for tonight, and I'm going to start with naming names. And the first one is John McCain. As I understand, the sponsor of a bill that I've been reading about called the Enemy Belligerent Act of 2010. And what I've been reading is that This is a further degradation of the Posse Comitatus Act, which prohibits military being involved in civilian police enforcement, etc. Well, that's a broad brush of it, but basically it. To now, in the most recent, I've been reading some history of how those things have been eroding. That now this bill supposedly would allow, in whatever scenario, the U.S. military to detain an American citizen on American property without charge and without any limit as to the time. And I've been reading I've been reading that, going through that bill tonight, and it's a long bill, as a lot of them are. But there's been a lot of comment on the internet about that. All of it that I've seen negative, not one positive thing. And then the other piece of legislation that's come to light recently, and is, I think it's called SOPA. And that piece of legislation, as I understand it, would allow the U.S. government, upon finding a piece of copyrighted material on a website that may not have been put there by the owners of that website, allows the U.S. government to completely shut down that enterprise. So, as I've seen in some extreme examples, someone puts a piece of copyrighted material on YouTube, makes YouTube responsible for that copyrighted content being on there, and allows the government to shut YouTube down. Now, I don't know if any of this would happen, but if this piece of legislation would even allow something like that, it's idiotic. There's no other word for it. And I think that from what I've been reading, that this is a lot of that this act is being supported by and being pushed by a desire by copyright holders and digital rights management and the record companies, etc. And I just don't think that's going to work very well. One member of Congress, and I can't remember his name, and I'll try and mention it next time because he deserves a pat on the back for this, has already come forward and said that he was going to filibuster it if it got to where it was necessary for him to do so. One other comment I want to make under naming names is Governor Sam Brownback. In the recent story about a high school girl that had tweeted something about the governor, and apparently his staffers who monitor web traffic about him, etc., had overreacted to it. At least that's the story this morning. And the governor, you remember the principal was had ordered the young lady, this 16-year-old girl, to apologize to the governor, which in and of itself was ridiculous. But then the governor comes out this morning and actually apologized to the young lady. That turned out the way it should have. So those are my comments for tonight. And I do have something else I want to talk about, but I'm going to get a couple of the people's names first. And particularly, it's, well, I'll go ahead and talk about it. It's about a judge, and it has to do with Citigroup and the SEC and how the judge found, and I read his 15-page opinion, had decided that this attempt to settle